Okay, so let's get into this. We're looking at a topic most of us, well, probably try not to think about too much.
Animal waste.
Exactly. We see it as just waste, something you need to deal with.
Get rid of it, yeah.
But what if it wasn't just waste? What if it was, I don't know, a resource, something valuable?
That's the surprising angle, isn't it? And that's exactly what this deep dive is about. We've gone through the sources you sent over, and honestly, there's this fascinating program in Cambodia doing just that.
Right. So our mission today is to really unpack those sources, pull out the key bits of information, the insights about this Cambodian program. It's literally taking manure and turning it into clean energy and really good fertilizer, too. We want to show you how this, well, pretty simple idea is actually powering homes, helping farms, and even fighting climate change.
And the sources, they clearly point to the main players involved. There's the National Biodigester Program, the NBP, they kind of kick things off. And then Nexus for Development came in later, bringing some really important expertise to help it grow.
Got it. So, okay, before we get to the solution, the biodigester itself, let's paint a picture. What was daily life like for these rural families in Cambodia, say, when it came to just cooking a meal? What did the sources tell us?
Well, the sources are pretty clear. Before this program, most families relied on, the traditional stuff.
Like firewood?
Firewood, yeah, collecting it for hours. Or buying charcoal. Or maybe getting those canisters of LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. But that gets expensive.
Right, so those were the main options.
Those are the daily options, yeah.
And they had some pretty big drawbacks, didn't they? It wasn't just a hassle.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
The sources specifically mention the cost, That eats into money families just don't have. And the time involved, like you said, gathering wood. But maybe the biggest thing the sources highlight is the health aspect.
The smoke.
Exactly. Burning wood or charcoal indoors, it just fills the house with smoke. Really harmful stuff.
Yeah, that indoor air pollution, we hear about that a lot. It's terrible, especially for, women and kids who are inside more often.
That's right.
So families are spending money they can't afford, spending hours of their day, and breathing in unhealthy air just to cook. That's the starting point.
That's the challenge they were facing, yeah. So the question becomes, how do you find a better way?
Which leads us perfectly to the solution itself, the biodigester. What exactly is this thing?
Well, according to the sources, it's actually quite a simple setup. Usually it's this dome-shaped structure, kind of like a small underground tank built right there on the farm.
Okay, on the farm itself.
Yeah, and you basically pipe the animal waste manure from pigs, cows, whatever they have, straight into it.
Okay, so the waste goes into this dome.
Correct. And inside, it's sealed off, no oxygen gets in. And then, well, nature does its thing. There's this process, anaerobic digestion.
Right.
Bacteria basically break down all the organic stuff in the manure. And this natural process produces two really useful things.
Okay, this is where the waste becomes a resource part kicks in. What comes out?
So first, you get biogas, which is mainly methane, actually. It's a gas you can burn for energy.
Like for cooking.
Exactly, like for cooking. And second, you get something called bioslurry. That's the liquid stuff left over. But it's not waste anymore. It's packed with nutrients.
Ah, so like a liquid fertilizer.
Precisely.
Biogas for energy, bioslurry for the fields. Simple concept, but sounds like it could change a lot. And the sources mention a farmer, Mr. Cannon, to sort of illustrate this.
Yeah, his story really helps make it concrete. He's a farmer in rural Campo, one of thousands using these digesters now.
What does he say about it?
He says, the digester itself, it's not high-tech or flashy, his words. But the effect, he just says it's made life easier. Simple as that.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did this go from, maybe a few farms trying it out to a national program? How'd that happen?
Well, the sources track it back to 2006. That's when the National Biodigester Program, the NBP, was launched. It was a joint effort between Cambodia's Ministry of Agriculture and an international development group called SNV.
Okay.
And their goal right from the start was exactly this: turn farm waste into clean energy for rural folks.
So the MVP got the ball rolling. Where did Nexus for Development come in? You mentioned them earlier.
They came into the picture quite a bit later, around 2018, and they brought something really specific and really powerful to the table: expertise in carbon finance.
Ah, okay. So connecting this farm-level stuff to the bigger picture, like climate change funding.
Exactly that. The sources really emphasized this partnership. You had the NBP with its huge network on the ground, the practical know-how,
Hmm.
and then Nexus comes in with the knowledge of how carbon markets work. That combination, that synergy, was apparently the key. It helped the program reach more people and really boost its climate impact. It allowed it to, really take off and scale up.
Makes sense. Let's really dive into those benefits then, using Mr. Cannong's experience, like the source does. You said biogas for cooking. How did that actually change things for his family every day?
Well, Kenon puts it very clearly. He says cooking with the biogas is just way more convenient. You got to remember what they were doing before finding wood, buying fuel.
Right. And the cost. Must have saved them money.
Huge savings. He says it directly. We spent a lot before on firewood and charcoal. Now we save that money. I mean, that's real money staying in their pockets.
Yeah, that's significant. And what about the health side? Getting rid of all that smoke.
That's a massive point, both in the sources and from Can Nong himself. He really stresses that using the biogas reduces smoke-related health risks. So it tackles that indoor air pollution problem directly. Better health for everyone in the house, especially, as you said, women and children.
Okay, so clean cooking fuel, that's one huge benefit. What about the other output? The bioslurry, the fertilizer.
Right, the bioslurry. It's essentially a free, high-quality organic fertilizer. So instead of buying chemical stuff or just using regular manure, which might not be as good, Canong uses this nutrient-rich liquid straight from the digester on his crops.
How does he, apply it? Does it say?
Yeah, he describes mixing it up into a slurry and putting it on his vegetables every 7 to 10 days or so. It just becomes part of his routine.
And the results? What does he see in his crops? Did the source mention that?
Yes, it quotes him saying, by 40 days, our vegetables are always ready to harvest with good quality. That's pretty specific. It suggests, healthier soil, better yields, maybe even faster growth. A real plus for his farm.
And he also mentioned it just helps keep the farm cleaner.
Yeah, that too. Because
Yeah.
the manure is going into the digester, it's not just lying around in piles, right?
Makes sense.
So he notes it helps keep our surroundings clean. He actually sums it all up quite nicely. Efficient, cost-saving, and great for the environment.
It really shows how one change, one technology can ripple outwards. But, okay, getting this to one farmer is great. Getting it to, what was the number, 29,000 households? That's a different challenge. How did they achieve that scale? And how did that carbon finance part really make it happen?
This is where Nexus's role becomes so important. Carbon finance it's fundamental here because it creates a way to fund the expansion that's directly tied to the good it's doing for the environment.
Okay, hang on. How does putting manure in a tank connect to carbon emissions and finance? Explain that link.
Okay, think about what isn't happening because these biodigesters are being used. First, families aren't burning as much, or any, firewood or LPG. Burning less fossil fuel or preventing deforestation means fewer carbon emissions right there.
Right. Avoided emissions from fuel.
Exactly. But there's another piece. Raw animal manure, when it just sits decomposing out in the open, releases methane. And methane is a really potent greenhouse gas, much more than CO2 in the short term. The biodigester captures that methane. The anaerobic digestion process turns it into biogas, which is then burned for cooking, but it prevents the raw methane from just escaping into the atmosphere.
Got it. So it's double-barreled, avoiding fuel emissions and capturing methane emissions from the waste itself.
Precisely. And the sources give a pretty staggering figure for this. By 2025, the program is expected to have prevented over 1 million tons of carbon emissions from entering the atmosphere.
Wow, 1 million tons.
True.
That's substantial. So how does that become actual money through carbon credits?
So these avoided emissions, they can be measured, they can be verified by independent auditors following really strict international rules. Once they pass that verification, they get officially issued as carbon credits. And basically, 1 carbon credit equals 1 ton of CO2 equivalent that's been kept out of the atmosphere.
And Nexus helps the program navigate all that paperwork and process.
That's exactly their role. They help projects like the MVP figure out if they're eligible, provide all sorts of support, technical, financial, operational, to make sure the project is set up correctly, meets those global standards, and can actually get the credits issued and verified.
And then do they help sell the credits too?
Yes, that's the final piece. They connect the program to companies or organizations internationally that want to buy carbon credits, usually to offset their own emissions. This creates income, a revenue stream for the NBP.
and that money goes back into the program.
Exactly. It's not just profit. It gets reinvested maybe to help lower the cost of new digesters for more families or to provide training and maintenance or just expand the program further.
So the carbon market isn't just some abstract financial thing here. It's actively funding the expansion and sustainability of the program based on the environmental benefits it's creating. It fuels the growth.
It's a really neat example of linking positive environmental results directly to financial viability, allowing the whole thing to scale up based on its actual impact.
So stepping back for the bigger picture, how many families did you say are using this now?
The source mentioned 29,000 firming households. That's a lot of families, a lot of lives directly impacted.
Yeah, it really is. And the sources seem to suggest this isn't just a one-off success. They see it as more of a template.
Yes, they explicitly call it a blueprint for scalable carbon projects, and they also frame it as a model for sustainable development that can scale across Southeast Asia. It really shows how you can potentially blend the right local technology with these global financial tools like carbon markets to get big results.
So wrapping it all up, you've got cleaner air inside homes. You've got more productive farms. Because of the fertilizer, families are saving time and money. And it all comes from looking at waste completely differently.
Yeah, turning waste into multiple valuable resources. It's a powerful story about innovative thinking, smart partnerships, and how finance can actually drive positive change on the ground.
Yeah.
It's more than just the technology, it's the whole system working together.
And that really brings us back to the whole point of these deep dives, doesn't it? Taking something that seems complex, like a national program tied into international carbon finance, and boiling it down to the clear insights, the things you really need to know. It shows being informed isn't just knowing a technology exists, but understanding the system that helps it succeed and grow.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a really interesting thought just based on what these sources imply. You have this incredibly impactful result coming from mixing a pretty simple, low-tech, local solution, the biodigester, with a complex global financial system, the carbon market. What does that specific combination tell us about how we might tackle other big problems? Could we find success by pairing other straightforward local innovations with broader, maybe global frameworks or funding mechanisms?